Okay, so have you ever wondered who helps make sure those storks stay busy?
Ah.
But instead of delivering babies, they're bringing in, like, prize-winning piglets.
I'm intrigued.
We are diving deep into the life of an animal artificial insemination technician today.
Okay.
And I'm willing to bet it's not going to be what either of us expects.
Right.
You sent over some really interesting resources on this, and I gotta say, I am ready to get into it.
Well, get ready because honestly, this is a fascinating field. This isn't your typical old McDonald had a farm kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're talking high tech mixed with hands-on work, animal science with super advanced reproductive technology. It's pretty wild.
Wow, see, already I'm hooked. Yeah. But before we go full-on National Geographic, let's break it down a little. What does an animal artificial insemination technician actually do all day?
It's much more than just the insemination, that's for sure. It's really a well-rounded approach to animal reproduction. So a big part of it is actually collecting and analyzing semen,
Oh.
making sure it's good quality, making sure that it's, viable. You'd be surprised how much actually goes into it. It's a really delicate process.
Really?
And then, of course, you have the preparing of the female, understanding those reproductive cycles, and making sure that you are using techniques that put the animal's well-being first.
So you're telling me it's kind of a mix of, like, lab precision, but then also good old-fashioned animal handling skills all in one.
Absolutely.
I bet that makes for some pretty interesting stories.
Oh, you can say that again. It's a physically demanding job. You're working with animals of all sizes, sometimes in some pretty tricky situations, and you've always got to be ready for the unexpected.
Yeah.
You ever had a 1,500-pound bull decide that maybe today is not the day?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, let's just say you get really good at thinking on your feet in this line of work.
I bet you do. Suddenly those calm animal videos on YouTube make a lot more sense. But it can't be all like close calls and, well, messy situations, right? There's got to be this immense sense of satisfaction,
Yeah.
helping bring new life into the world.
Absolutely. For somebody who is passionate about animals, it is an incredibly rewarding job. And it's not just assisting with reproduction. You're helping to maintain healthy bloodlines. You're preserving rare breeds. You're even contributing to something as important as global food security. So yeah, the impact is huge.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. Talk about finding your purpose.
Ah.
But that level of expertise, that can't be easy to get. What kind of education and skill set do you need to work in a field like this?
Well, you've got to start with a really strong foundation in animal science.
Yeah.
You need to understand the animal's anatomy, their physiology, and then, of course, you've got reproductive biology.
Yeah.
Having some veterinary knowledge under your belt is also incredibly helpful.
Makes sense.
When you're thinking about animal health, animal handling, all of that. But it's not all about textbooks and microscopes, though.
Right. You've got to have those, like, real-world animal whisperer skills.
What about the techniques themselves? I've got to imagine that's a very specialized skill set. You are absolutely right. There's definitely an art to it. And that's where those hands-on experiences come in. Think internships on breeding facilities, apprenticeships with some of the more experienced technicians. I mean, even volunteering at animal shelters to get comfortable with animals and understanding how they behave. That's all so valuable.
So what you're saying is even if someone doesn't come from, say, a farming background, they can still work their way into a field like this with the right kind of dedication.
Absolutely. It's about proving that you're passionate, that you have those practical skills, and most importantly, that you can handle the, let's call it the livelier side of the job. One of the resources you shared, actually, RoleCatcher.
Yeah?
They highlight some really interesting pathways for this.
Oh, yeah. RoleCatcher.
Yeah.
I was so fascinated by how they break down the career stages in this field.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of career, is it?
Definitely not. You might start out as a junior technician, assisting with the more basic tasks, learning the ropes. But as you get more experience, you can start to specialize in a particular species.
Okay.
Like maybe horses, cattle, maybe even something a little more exotic.
Now that you mention it, I do remember reading something in there about working with endangered species.
Yeah.
That's got to be an incredible application for this kind of work. Using those skills to help conserve some of the world's most vulnerable animals.
It's a rapidly growing field, no doubt about it. And with that growth comes competition, which is where those resources from RoleCatcher can really come in handy. They've got a whole section on crafting that perfect CV, preparing for those interviews. And get this, they even have AI that helps analyze job descriptions.
Wait, hold on. AI-powered career coaching. Now, that's something I never thought I'd hear about. But seriously, having tools like that to help navigate the job market, it sounds incredibly useful. especially in a field as specific as this one.
Absolutely. It really just goes to show you how technology is changing everything around us, even when it comes to, well, the not so technological. But speaking of technology, there was one term in the materials that you sent that really caught my eye, and that was cryopreservation.
Okay, cryopreservation. I mean, first of all, it's not every day you get to just casually drop that word into a conversation. What in the world is cryopreservation all about?
Well, it's pretty fascinating, actually. Cryopreservation is the process of freezing semen,
Okay.
but we're not talking about your average ice cube tray here.
Yeah.
This is high-tech freezing. We're talking about preserving that genetic material so that it can be stored for a very long time. It can be shipped across the country, even internationally.
Hold on. You're telling me that, like, a prize-winning bull in, say, Texas could become a father in Argentina, and it's all thanks to cryopreservation.
Exactly. Think of it like a global sperm bank, but for animals. Yeah. It's a game changer for breeders because it allows them to access those top quality genetics from all over the place. And that's really important when we're talking about things like preserving rare breeds or really trying to enhance certain desirable traits.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. You know, it's interesting how this all circles back to what we were talking about earlier, about how this career is about so much more than just having the technical know-how. You've got to understand genetics, reproductive biology, and you've got to stay on top of all the latest advancements. That's a lot of responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. That's why consistently learning is non-negotiable in a field like this. And RoleCatcher really emphasizes that as well. They recommend going to workshops, getting certified, staying current with all the research because it is a field that's constantly changing.
And I'd imagine it comes with its fair share of unexpected hurdles too, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you're working with living creatures, and sometimes things just don't go according to plan.
Oh, that's an understatement. As rewarding as it can be, it's not a career for the faint of heart. You're dealing with animals that can be unpredictable. You've got potentially dangerous materials to work with. And then, of course, there's that emotional aspect of working with creatures who can't necessarily tell you what's wrong.
Yeah. You know, that emotional side is not something I had really considered before, but it makes a lot of sense. There've got to be tough days, times when procedures don't go as planned or an animal might be suffering, and that's got to be hard.
It's the reality of this kind of job, and it's something that anyone considering it really needs to be prepared for. I like that RoleCatcher doesn't shy away from that. They actually list compassion fatigue as one of the potential challenges, and they really highlight how important self-care is and making sure you're seeking support when you need it.
That is so important in any field, but especially one like this. So it's not just about technical expertise, it's about having the emotional resilience to handle the ups and downs.
Exactly. It's
Yep.
about building relationships with your colleagues, with veterinarians, with the breeders. You're all part of a team. Having that support system in place is crucial.
You know, it's interesting how much we keep coming back to that teamwork aspect. Because even though a lot of the work might seem solitary, like it's just you and the animal, there's this whole network behind the scenes.
And it's a network that's only going to get bigger as the field grows. Remember how we were talking about all those different career paths, those specializations? As the demand for animal artificial insemination technicians increases, so will all those niche areas that people can focus on.
So let me get this straight. Someone could start their career, say, working with a bunch of different animals on a farm, and then eventually end up specializing in something like equine reproduction at like a really prestigious breeding facility, or even transition into something that's more research-focused, maybe working on like groundbreaking conservation projects.
You got it. The possibilities are really quite diverse, which I think is a huge draw for people who enjoy a little bit of variety and want to have those opportunities to really hone in on a specific area over time.
You know, it's like this whole career path is a deep dive in and of itself. You start with this passion for animals, and it opens up this whole complex world of science and technology and ethical considerations.
That is a really great way to put it. And speaking of ethical considerations, there is one aspect we haven't even touched on yet.
Okay, now you've got me really curious. What kind of ethical considerations come into play with a career like this? Because you're right, it's not something you'd think about right away, but it makes sense when you realize we're talking about shaping the future of these animal populations.
Exactly. And it's a conversation that's becoming more and more important. Like with any kind of technology that gives us this much influence over nature, we have to be very careful about how we're using it.
Yeah.
We're making decisions about which traits are passed down, which bloodlines are given priority.
Right.
And that brings up a whole host host of questions about things like genetic diversity, the possibility of unintended consequences further down the line, and of course the welfare of the animals themselves.
So it's not just about what can be done, but what should be done,
Exactly.
which adds a whole other layer of complexity to this career. And I imagine those conversations about ethics, they probably change just as fast as the advancements in the field.
All the time. Take, for example, how we select for certain traits that boost production, like how much milk a cow can produce. Now, on the surface, that might seem like a good thing, right? But when we push animals to their physiological limits, sometimes that can lead to health problems. So it's this constant balancing act of trying to maximize output while also making sure that the animals involved are healthy and well cared for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It reminds me of that saying, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. This has been so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's listening right now and thinking, hey, this could be the career for me?
Well, if you're the kind of person who's passionate about animals, loves science, and you're ready for a job that's both physically and intellectually challenging, I say go for it. This field needs people who are dedicated, compassionate, and always willing to learn and grow.
And probably people who aren't afraid of a little hard work, right?
A little, yeah.
But in all seriousness, this has been eye-opening. I never would have guessed that a career could be so hands-on while also having such huge implications.
It just goes to show sometimes the paths we least expect lead to the most amazing places.
That is so true. And there you have it, listeners. Another deep dive in the books. We explored the fascinating and the challenging and the surprisingly complex world of animal artificial insemination technicians. And until next time, keep those brains curious. Okay, you're really going to make me wait for this one. What kind of ethical stuff are we talking about here?
Well, it's something that comes up more and more these days. I mean, think about it. With any technology that has this much power over nature, we have a responsibility to be careful, right?
Right.
We're literally making decisions about which traits get passed down to the next generation, which bloodlines are going to be the most common.
Yeah.
So it brings up some big questions, like what about genetic diversity? What about the animal's well-being? What if there are consequences down the line that we haven't even thought of? It's like, it's not just about if we can do something. It's about if we should, you know?
Exactly.
And that just adds a whole other layer of thinking to this job, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. And these conversations are always evolving, just like the technology itself. Take, for example, how we choose which traits to focus on. Like milk production in cows. We can use these techniques to get more milk, right? But sometimes pushing the animals that far can cause health problems. So it's this constant balancing act between what we can achieve and what's best for the animals.
That makes a lot of sense. Like that saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
So after all this, what would you say to someone listening who's thinking this might be the job for them? I'd say if you're truly passionate about animals, if you love science, and if you're up for a challenge both physically and mentally, go for it. This is a field that needs people who are dedicated, compassionate, and ready to never stop learning.
And maybe people who aren't afraid to get their hands a little dirty, right?
Maybe just a little, yeah.
Well, this has been incredible. I never would guessed this career path was so much more than meets the eye.
Sometimes it's the paths we least expect that turn out to be the most rewarding.
So true. And there you have it, listeners. Another deep dive successfully navigated. We explored the ins and outs of being an animal artificial insemination technician. And wow, what a journey. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.